I'm Ashley, 25, and I still wake up screaming at midnight. 3 years ago, my stepfather Derek kicked down my bedroom door in a drunken rage. The wood splintered as his boot connected, revealing his twisted face. He lunged at me, fists connecting with my jaw before throwing me against the wall. The sickening pop of my shoulder dislocating punctuated my scream. Through tear-blurred vision, I saw my mother Stephanie standing in the doorway, watching silently as I collapsed to the floor. That night changed everything. Before I continue, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. My childhood wasn't always a nightmare. For 12 years, I had a loving father named Nathan who coached my soccer team and helped with science projects. We were that picture-perfect family in the suburbs with weekend barbecues and family game nights. Dad worked as an architect while Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Our home was full of laughter and warmth. Everything changed when Dad died suddenly from an aneurysm. One day he was helping me with homework, the next day he was gone. Mom and I clung to each other through the grief. For 2 years, it was just us against the world. We developed inside jokes and Friday night pizza traditions. She became both parents, attending my school events and staying up late to talk about my teenage worries. I thought nothing could break our bond. Mom met Derek at a school fundraiser when I was 14. He was a parent volunteer with a daughter at another school, recently divorced and eager to impress. I remember his firm handshake and the way he called me kiddo with a wink. At first, he seemed perfect, bringing flowers to our house, taking us to nice restaurants, and listening attentively to Mom's stories. He had a good job in finance and drove a nice car. After 6 months of dating, he proposed. Mom was happier than I'd seen her since Dad died, so I pushed aside my unease and smiled in their wedding photos. The change wasn't immediate but gradual, like water slowly rising around us. First came the comments about the house being messy when it wasn't. Then criticisms about Mom's cooking or the way she dressed. He'd laugh it off as just joking when she looked hurt. I noticed Mom starting to second-guess herself, checking with Derek before making any decisions. By the time I was 16, our home had transformed. Derek insisted on controlling the finances, giving Mom an allowance despite her teacher's salary going into their joint account. He checked her phone regularly and questioned her about conversations with colleagues. When she came home 15 minutes late from work, he'd interrogate her about where she'd been. With me, he started with subtle jabs. Shouldn't you be studying instead of watching TV? Or that outfit makes you look heavier than you are. When I made honor roll, he'd say, imagine if you actually tried your hardest. Each comment chipped away at my self-confidence. Mom's transformation was heartbreaking. The woman who once stood up to my elementary school principal over an unfair policy now jumped when Derek called her name. She developed nervous habits, checking her watch constantly, texting him updates about her whereabouts, apologizing preemptively for imagined offenses. When I tried talking to her about Derek's behavior, she defended him. He just wants what's best for us or marriage requires compromise, Ashley. The word compromise became her shield against acknowledging what was happening. I focused on academics as my escape plan. With college scholarships as my goal, I spent extra hours in the library to avoid being home. But my financial situation remained precarious. My college fund from Dad's life insurance was supposedly in a trust Derek managed. I couldn't access it without his approval. Senior year of high school, I got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, but still needed family financial support. Derek made it clear, I could live at home while attending the local college campus, or I was on my own. With no savings and minimum wage from my part-time job at the bookstore, I had no choice but to stay. While my friends moved into dorms and experienced independence, I remained trapped in Derek's kingdom. I decorated my small bedroom to be my sanctuary, but even that space wasn't truly mine. Derek had a habit of inspecting my room while I was out, moving things slightly to let me know he'd been there. Through it all, I held on to one truth: this was temporary. I would finish my degree, find a job and escape. What I didn't realize was how much worse things would get before I could break free. The transition from verbal to physical abuse happened on a rainy Tuesday night during my sophomore year of college. I was 19, juggling classes and my bookstore job while maintaining the perfect GPA needed for my scholarship. That evening, I had a crucial study group for an upcoming economics exam. We lost track of time at the library, and I texted Mom I'd be home around 10:30 p.m. When I quietly unlocked the front door at 10:40, Derek was waiting in the darkened living room, only the blue glow of the muted TV illuminating his face. "Where the hell have you been?" His voice was low, controlled, more frightening than if he'd yelled. I explained about the study group, showing him the economics textbook in my backpack. I texted Mom. "The session ran long because we have an exam tomorrow." He stood slowly, blocking my path to the stairs. "Your mother doesn't make the rules in this house." The argument escalated quickly. Derek accused me of lying, of seeing a boy, of deliberately disrespecting his authority. When I tried to step around him, his hand shot out, grabbing my upper arm with bruising force. "I'm not done talking to you," he growled. "Let go, you're hurting me," I said, trying to pull away. What happened next played out in horrifying slow motion. Derek's face contorted with rage. He shoved me backward with such force that I slammed into the wall, my head cracking against the framed family photo, ironically, our happy family portrait from their wedding. The frame shattered as I slid to the floor, a searing pain radiating from my shoulder. The commotion brought Mom downstairs. She took in the scene, me on the floor surrounded by broken glass, Derek standing over me, and for a moment, I saw shock in her eyes. I thought, finally, she'll see him for what he is. Instead, she said, "Ashley, why do you always have to provoke him?" The betrayal of that moment burned deeper than my physical pain. As Mom helped Derek clean up the glass, carefully avoiding looking at me, I realized I was truly alone. I retreated to my room, locking the door and examining my injuries in the bathroom mirror. A bruise was forming on my arm in the shape of fingers, and a small cut on my scalp was bleeding into my hair. That night, I took photos of my injuries using my phone's timer, hiding the images in a password-protected app. I didn't know what I'd do with them, but some part of me recognized the need for evidence. The next day, I went to my economics exam with concealer covering the bruise on my temple. Afterward, I visited the college counseling center, claiming I was stressed about grades. The counselor, Judith, saw through my story immediately. "Those look like finger marks on your arm," she said gently when my sleeve rode up. I broke down, telling her everything. She explained that I was experiencing domestic abuse and gave me resources, hotline numbers, shelter information, legal options. But when we discussed my situation realistically, the barriers to leaving became clear: no money, nowhere to go, still dependent on tuition assistance that required my home address. "Sometimes the safest option temporarily is to stay while making an exit plan," Judith said. "But I want to see you weekly, and if things escalate, we'll find immediate solutions." I developed survival strategies. I volunteered for extra shifts at the bookstore to minimize time at home. I studied in public places. I became hyper-aware of Derek's moods, learning to read the signs of impending explosions, the tightening around his eyes, the way he'd drum his fingers on the kitchen counter. I started saving money in a secret account, just $20 here and there from my bookstore paycheck, asking for cash back on grocery purchases and pocketing the difference. It wasn't much, but it was something Derek couldn't control. My friend Kayla noticed the changes in me. How I flinched at loud noises, declined invitations to social events, made excuses for not inviting friends over. After persistent questioning, I finally confided in her while we were studying in a coffee shop far from campus where nobody would overhear. "You need to get out of there," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm trying," I replied. "But I have nowhere to go and no money." Kayla offered her couch, but her tiny apartment already housed 3 roommates in a 2-bedroom space. Still, knowing someone believed me helped. My academic performance began suffering despite my efforts. I'd always been an A student, but concentrating became difficult. Flashbacks of that night would intrude during lectures. I'd jolt awake from nightmares, leaving me exhausted for morning classes. Professor Martin noticed my declining participation in his sociology seminar and asked me to stay after class one day. "You're one of my brightest students, but something's changed," he said. "Is everything okay?" I gave my practiced answer about being tired from working while studying, and he didn't push. But he did extend deadlines for my assignments without me asking, a kindness that brought me to tears in the privacy of the campus bathroom. What made the situation even more maddening was Derek's public persona. To neighbors, colleagues, and family friends, he was charming Derek, successful businessman, devoted husband, caring stepfather putting his troubled stepdaughter through college. He'd brag about my grades to dinner guests while simultaneously undermining my confidence at home. The isolation grew as Derek found ways to limit my connections. He'd accidentally delete messages on the home phone. He'd volunteer Mom for activities when I had plans with her. He'd create crises requiring my immediate help whenever I made social plans. That first physical incident opened a door that couldn't be closed. Now that Derek had crossed that line, the threat of violence hung in the air constantly. I never felt safe in my own home again. While the physical violence was traumatic, Derek's psychological warfare proved even more damaging. He was a master manipulator, using tactics I'd later learn were textbook examples of emotional abuse. Gaslighting became his specialty. When I mentioned the shoving incident to Mom a week later, Derek overheard and jumped in. "What are you talking about? You tripped and fell into the wall. I tried to catch you." He said it with such conviction that for a moment, I questioned my own memory. When I insisted that wasn't what happened, he looked concernedly at Mom and said, "She's been under a lot of pressure with school. Maybe she should see someone." He planted seeds of doubt in Mom's mind about my mental stability. If I got upset about something he said, he'd tell her I was emotionally fragile or just like your sister, referencing Mom's estranged sister who struggled with bipolar disorder. The comparison was strategic. Mom's biggest fear was that I'd inherited mental health issues from that side of the family. Mom's own mental health deteriorated under Derek's influence. She developed anxiety, constantly trying to anticipate his needs and prevent his displeasure. She lost weight, her hands trembled when pouring coffee, and she checked her phone obsessively for his messages. The strong woman who raised me was disappearing, replaced by a nervous shadow always seeking Derek's approval. I began researching domestic abuse at campus computers, clearing the browser history meticulously. What I discovered was disturbing. I could have been reading about our exact situation. The isolation, the financial control, the gradual escalation, the public versus private persona, it was all textbook. Most chilling was learning that the most dangerous time for abuse victims is when they try to leave. Through the counseling center, I connected with a therapist who offered discreet sessions I could attend between classes. Dr. Lisa helped me understand I wasn't responsible for Derek's behavior or Mom's choices. We worked on coping strategies and maintaining my sense of self despite the constant gaslighting. "Your perceptions are valid," she would remind me. "Trust yourself first." Derek's psychological tactics extended to my belongings. Things would disappear: a favorite sweater, notes for an important exam, a necklace Dad had given me. When I asked about them, Derek would feign ignorance or suggest I was becoming forgetful. Weeks later, I'd find the missing items in strange places: my sweater in the garage storage, my notes mixed into old magazines, my necklace in the guest room drawer. The message was clear: nothing was truly mine, nothing was safe. The threats became more sophisticated as I progressed through college. When I mentioned applying for internships, Derek casually remarked, "Most companies do extensive background checks these days. They ask for character references from family. Wouldn't want anything negative coming up." The implied threat was clear: cross me, and I'll sabotage your future. I became hypervigilant about my privacy. I got a small lockbox for my journal, keeping the key on a cord around my neck while sleeping. I used a password manager for my accounts and changed passwords regularly. I created email filters to prevent Derek from seeing certain messages when he borrowed my laptop. One evening during my junior year, I found Mom alone in the kitchen and decided to make one direct attempt to reach her. "Mom, do you realize how Derek treats us isn't normal?" I asked quietly, showing her an article about emotional abuse on my phone. Her eyes darted nervously to the door before reading. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, recognition, perhaps. Then the defensive wall came up. "Every marriage has problems, Ashley. You're being dramatic. Derek works hard to provide for us. He controls everything, Mom. He isolates us. He hurts me. Don't you see it?" Her voice hardened. "I see an ungrateful daughter who doesn't appreciate her stepfather's sacrifices. Not every man would support his wife's adult daughter through college." The conversation ended when we heard Derek's car in the driveway. Mom quickly wiped away tears and busied herself with dinner preparations, the momentary connection broken. I maintained an encrypted journal documenting every incident, every manipulation, every threat, partly as evidence, partly to reassure myself I wasn't imagining things. Entries included dates, times, witnesses if any, and detailed descriptions. The journal became my truth anchor when Derek's gaslighting made me doubt my own perceptions. Through my therapist, I connected with a domestic violence advocate named Maria who helped me develop a long-term exit strategy. We met in the Campus Women's Center, where she reviewed my documentation and helped me understand my legal options. "The journal is good," she said. "Keep collecting evidence, but store it somewhere safe, preferably digitally with cloud backups he can't access." She explained the process for restraining orders, but cautioned that without significant physical evidence or police reports, they could be difficult to obtain. More concerning, she warned that unsuccessful legal action could escalate the situation. "The most important thing right now is your safety plan," Maria emphasized. "Where will you go? How will you support yourself? What documents do you need?" Together, we created a checklist: birth certificate, social security card, bank statements, medical records, academic transcripts. I gathered these items gradually, making copies and storing originals with Kayla. "When you're ready to leave," Maria said, "we'll make it happen quickly." The element of surprise is crucial. What I didn't know then was how much I would need that advice, and how quickly ready to leave would transform from a distant goal to an immediate necessity. By the spring semester of my senior year, I was counting down the days to graduation. I had maintained my scholarship despite everything, and my exit plan was taking shape. I'd applied for jobs in cities at least 3 hours away, using Kayla's address on applications. I had almost $3,000 saved in my secret account, not much, but enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a cheap apartment. The second major incident occurred 2 months before graduation. Derek had been drinking more heavily, his moods more volatile. The night before, he'd screamed at Mom for buying the wrong brand of coffee, throwing the canister against the wall. The tension in the house was unbearable. That morning, while Derek was at work and Mom was visiting her sister, I made a decision. I drove to the police station, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Officer Brian took my statement in a small interview room with industrial carpeting and fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. I showed him photos of my injuries from previous incidents, my detailed journal entries, and text messages from Mom that inadvertently confirmed some events. Officer Brian seemed genuinely concerned, taking careful notes and asking follow-up questions. "I'm afraid to go back, but I have nowhere else to go until graduation," I explained. "We take domestic violence very seriously," he assured me. "We'll need to investigate and speak with your mother and stepfather, but there are resources available to help you." He connected me with a victim advocate who helped me file for a temporary restraining order. For the first time, I felt like someone with authority was taking action. The system was working as it should. Or so I thought. 3 days later, I returned home from class to find Derek waiting for me, his face eerily calm. "Got a call from Jim today," he said, referring to his golf buddy who happened to be a sergeant at the police department. "Interesting conversation about you filing a police report. Making up stories about your family." My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone at the station about Derek's connections in the department. It's not made up, I said, backing toward the door. You know what you did. Derek's laugh was chilling. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected financial advisor who volunteers with the Police Benevolent Association? Or the unstable college girl with a history of attention-seeking behavior? What history? You made that up. He smirked. Your mother is already at the station explaining your tendency to exaggerate and your resentment issues since your father died. We're very concerned about your mental health, Ashley. My restraining order request was denied the next day. The investigation stalled as character statements from Mom, Derek's colleagues, and family friends painted me as an emotionally troubled young woman imagining abuse. Officer Brian now avoided eye contact when I called for updates. Even my documentation was dismissed as one-sided accounts with no corroboration. The system I'd trusted had failed me completely. When I returned to the apartment that evening, Mom was waiting. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady. Derek told me everything. How could you try to destroy our family like this? Mom, he's manipulating you. Everything I reported is true, and you know it. She shook her head. You need help, Ashley. We've been enabling your behavior for too long. Derek thinks you might have borderline personality disorder, like my cousin Diane. The betrayal cut deep. Not only had she sided with him, but they were now constructing a narrative about my mental health to discredit me. I realized with crushing clarity that Mom was too far gone in Derek's web of control to help me or herself. That night, I called Kayla in tears. The restraining order was denied. They're saying I made everything up. That's bullshit, she said fiercely. What can I do? Just help me get through these last 2 months until graduation. My job search intensified. I interviewed for positions in Seattle, nearly 200 miles away, using the campus career center's private rooms for video interviews. When I received an offer from a marketing firm with a starting date 2 weeks after graduation, I accepted immediately. Derek's vigilance increased after the failed police report. He installed a home security system that notified his phone whenever doors opened. He upgraded the family computer with monitoring software. He began insisting on driving me to and from campus, claiming concerns about my state of mind. When I discovered he'd been reading my emails by finding draft responses he'd accidentally saved instead of discarding, I created a decoy email account for job-related communications. I removed my real resume from job sites and uploaded a fake one indicating I was seeking local positions. One evening, Mom knocked on my bedroom door. Her face was drawn with worry. Ashley, Derek and I have been talking about your future. We think it might be best if you continue living here after graduation. Just until you're more stable. Derek knows someone at Lancaster Financial who might give you an entry-level position. The offer confirmed my suspicions. They had no intention of letting me establish independence. The opportunity would keep me financially tied to them, working for Derek's friend who would undoubtedly report back on my every move. I'll think about it, I lied, knowing my escape plans needed to accelerate. With graduation approaching, I had one final conversation with my domestic violence advocate, Maria. The system failed you this time, she acknowledged. But that doesn't mean you can't get free. Sometimes the quietest exits are the most successful. I'm scared, I admitted. What if he finds me? We'll take precautions. Different name on utilities, P.O. box for mail, privacy settings on everything. And once you're established in your new city, you can consider legal options there, away from his influence. I nodded, clutching the safety plan we'd developed like a lifeline. 2 more weeks, I told myself. Just 2 more weeks. What I didn't realize was that I wouldn't even get those 2 weeks. Events were about to force my hand in the most violent way possible. With graduation only 10 days away, I moved into the final phase of my escape plan. Each day after classes, I would secretly pack one small item into my backpack and leave it in Kayla's apartment: winter clothes, books, mementos from my father, anything I couldn't bear to leave behind but wouldn't be immediately noticed missing. My Seattle apartment was secured with first and last month's rent paid from my secret savings. I'd arranged for a mail forwarding service that would scan and email my mail rather than providing my new physical address. I created new email accounts and social media profiles under variations of my middle name, Anna, to use after leaving. The marketing firm in Seattle had been understanding when I explained I needed to delay giving them my permanent address until move-in day. Family situation, I'd said vaguely, and the HR manager had nodded without pressing for details. My therapist Dr. Lisa helped me process the complex emotions about leaving. The guilt over abandoning Mom, the fear of starting over alone, the anxiety about Derek possibly finding me. We worked through grounding techniques for panic attacks and created a support plan for my first months in Seattle. Your responsibility is to yourself first, she reminded me in our final session. You cannot save someone who isn't ready to be saved. I'd researched domestic violence resources in Seattle and had contact information for support groups I could join. Dr. Lisa connected me with a colleague there who agreed to continue my therapy via secure video sessions. The financial aspect was trickiest. I had carefully monitored the joint account I shared with Mom, originally opened when I was a minor waiting for my final student loan disbursement. The day it arrived, I planned to transfer most of it to my secret account, leaving just enough to avoid suspicion. But Derek was one step ahead. Checking the account online during a study break at the library, I discovered he'd added himself as an account holder and transferred $2,000, almost my entire balance, into their household account. The reason listed, contribution to household expenses. I felt sick. That money was meant for my textbooks and educational expenses. Without it, my escape fund was significantly depleted. Kayla found me hyperventilating in the library bathroom. He took almost everything, I sobbed. I can't afford the moving truck I reserved. I might not have enough for groceries my first month. Kayla's solution was immediate and generous. My parents gave me graduation money. Take what you need and pay me back when you're on your feet. I initially refused, but she insisted. It's not charity, it's a loan. With interest, even. I'm going to be an accounting major, trust me. I'll track every penny. Her humor broke through my panic, and I accepted enough to cover the moving truck and basic necessities. We revised my budget to account for the loss, cutting out everything non-essential for the first 3 months. Ramen noodles and thrift store furniture it is, I said, trying to sound lighthearted. Freedom-flavored ramen, Kayla corrected. The gourmet kind. For days before graduation, Mom cornered me in the kitchen while Derek was at a golf tournament. I found the Seattle apartment listing in your browser history, she said quietly. You're really leaving? The blood drained from my face. I'd been so careful, but had forgotten to clear my browsing data once. Mom, Just listen, she interrupted. Derek doesn't know yet. But you need to understand what you're doing to this family. After everything we've done for you, you're just going to disappear? What will people think? I realized she wasn't concerned about losing me. She was worried about appearances, about how Derek would react, about the family narrative being disrupted. I can't stay here anymore, I said simply. It's not safe for me. That's ridiculous. If you just stop antagonizing him. Mom, he hurts me. He controls and manipulates both of us. This isn't love, it's abuse. Her face hardened. You always were dramatic. Just like when you were little and needed a nightlight until you were 12. Always afraid of imaginary monsters. Derek isn't imaginary, and neither are his fists, I replied, rolling up my sleeve to show a fresh bruise from where he'd grabbed me the previous day. She looked away. Family should stay together. Whatever the cost. Not this cost, Mom. I won't pay with my life. You're exaggerating again. She sighed, then fixed me with a steady gaze. No one will believe you, you know. Derek has made sure of that. You try to tell people what goes on here, they'll think you're unstable. The warning was clear: leave if you must, but don't expect support or validation. I realized then that Mom was too deeply enmeshed in Derek's reality to acknowledge the truth, even to herself. Accepting the abuse meant acknowledging her role in enabling it, and that cognitive dissonance was too painful to bridge. That evening, I received an email alert that someone had attempted to access my student account where graduation information was stored. The login came from our home IP address while I was at the library. Derek was looking for details about the ceremony, likely to determine exactly when I'd be finished with school and implement whatever plan they had for keeping me dependent. I called Kayla immediately. We need to move up the timeline. I think he's figuring it out. When? She asked without hesitation. Tomorrow. I'll leave while they're both at work. I'll call in sick. The truck rental place opens at 8 a.m. We finalized details in hushed tones. I'd pack my remaining essentials tonight and leave them by my window. Kayla would pull up at 9 a.m. when the house was empty, we'd load quickly, and I'd be on the road by 10. That night, I methodically packed the last of my belongings: laptop, remaining clothes, financial documents, and the few photos I had of Dad. I wrote a brief note to Mom, not revealing my destination but explaining that I needed to build my own life. I told her I loved her and would be in touch when I felt safe. As I sealed the envelope, I felt conflicting emotions: grief for the mother I was losing, relief at finally escaping, fear of the unknown ahead, and guilt that I couldn't help Mom see the truth. But beneath it all was a steely determination. I was choosing myself, my safety, my future. For the first time in years, I was taking back control. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., planning to be showered and ready before Derek and Mom left for work at 8:30. Then I'd wait for Kayla's text that the coast was clear. I didn't know as I drifted off to sleep that my carefully constructed plan was about to be violently derailed. The next few hours would change everything. I woke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. The digital clock on my nightstand read 11:57 p.m. Disoriented, I sat up, thinking Derek had dropped something in one of his late-night kitchen raids. Then I heard the heavy thud of footsteps on the stairs, not the careful steps of someone trying to be quiet, but the deliberate stomp of rage. My body recognized the danger before my mind fully processed it. I leaped from bed and shoved my desk chair under the doorknob, a precaution I'd taken on particularly bad nights. My heart hammered as I grabbed my phone from the charger, fingers fumbling to dial 911. Ashley. Derek's voice boomed from the hallway, slurred with alcohol. Open this goddamn door. The 911 operator answered as the first impact hit my door, the wood frame groaning. My stepfather is trying to break into my room, I whispered urgently. He's violent. Please hurry. I gave our address as another slam shook the door. Stay on the line if possible, the dispatcher instructed. Officers are on their way. The third impact splintered the door frame, the chair leg screeching against the floor as it gave way. In the doorway stood Derek, his face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. In his hand was my acceptance letter from the Seattle marketing firm, the paper crumpled in his fist. You ungrateful little bitch, he snarled, advancing into the room. After everything we've done for you. I backed toward the window, phone still clutched in my hand. The police are coming. Don't touch me. He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. By the time they get here, we'll have sorted out this misunderstanding. Just a family disagreement, right? Behind him in the hallway, I saw Mom appear in her nightgown, face pale in the dim light. Derek, please, she said weakly. Let's talk about this tomorrow. She's planning to run away, he shouted, waving the letter. After all we've invested in her. After all the sacrifices. I kept backing up until I hit the wall. It's not running away. I'm 22 years old with a job offer. I'm starting my career. Your career? He stepped closer, alcohol fumes wafting from him. Your career is whatever I say it is. You live in my house, you follow my rules. Not anymore, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. His face darkened. You think you can just leave? Take what you want from this family and disappear? You don't decide when you're ready. I do. The dispatcher's voice came faintly from my phone. Officers are 4 minutes out. Derek heard it too. His eyes fixed on the phone, and something calculating replaced the raw fury in his expression. In one swift movement, he lunged forward, grabbing for the phone. I ducked, but his other hand caught my hair, yanking me back. Pain exploded across my scalp as he slammed me against the wall, his forearm pressing against my throat. Hang up, he growled. I couldn't breathe. Spots danced in my vision as I clawed at his arm. With my free hand, I still gripped the phone, trying to keep the line open. Derek's fist connected with my temple, sending me stumbling sideways. The phone flew from my hand, skittering under the bed. Another blow caught my jaw, snapping my head back. I tasted blood. Stop it. Mom screamed from the doorway, but made no move to intervene. I fought back with everything I had, scratching at his face, kicking at his shins. My self-defense training from campus workshops flashed through my mind. Go for vulnerable areas. I drove my knee upward, connecting with his groin. He doubled over with a grunt of pain, and I pushed past him toward the door. I almost made it. My fingers grazed the doorframe before Derek recovered, grabbing my arm and spinning me around with such force that I crashed into my bookshelf. Books and mementos rained down as I stumbled, trying to regain my balance. You're not going anywhere, he roared, seizing both my arms and shaking me violently. Something in my right shoulder gave way with a sickening pop. White-hot pain shot down my arm as Derek continued shaking me, my now dislocated shoulder grinding with each movement. I screamed, a primal sound of agony that seemed to come from somewhere outside myself. Through tear-blurred vision, I saw Mom standing frozen in the doorway, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping the doorframe so tightly her knuckles were white. Our eyes met for a moment, hers wide with horror, mine pleading for help. She took one step forward, then stopped as Derek turned to look at her. Go back to bed, Stephanie, he ordered. I'm handling this. To my disbelief, she hesitated only briefly before turning away. The sound of her bedroom door closing echoed through the hallway. The final betrayal. Even witnessing his violence directly, she chose him. Derek turned back to me, still clutching my injured arm. The pain was excruciating, radiating from my shoulder through my entire body. Black edges crept into my vision as shock set in. You think you can leave? He hissed, his face inches from mine. You belong to this family. You do what I say. I gathered what strength remained and spat in his face. I don't belong to anyone. His expression contorted with rage. He flung me aside like a rag doll. I crashed into my desk, my dislocated shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. The pain was overwhelming, consciousness slipping away as I collapsed to the floor. The last thing I heard before blackness took me was the distant wail of police sirens. I don't know how long I was unconscious, maybe minutes, maybe longer. When I came to, the room was empty. My shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, and the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The house was eerily silent. Painfully, I dragged myself to a sitting position, cradling my useless right arm against my chest. My phone was still under the bed, the 911 call disconnected. Fumbling with my left hand, I called Kayla. I need help, I whispered when she answered, my voice raspy from Derek's chokehold. He found out. It's bad. Oh my God, Ashley. Where are you? Are you safe? Should I call 911? I already did. But I need to leave now. Tonight. I can't wait until morning. I'm coming, she said without hesitation. 20 minutes. Can you get outside? I looked around my devastated room, the splintered door, overturned furniture, scattered belongings. My carefully packed bags had been dumped, contents strewn across the floor. Yes, I said, though I wasn't sure how I'd manage with one arm. Where's your parents' car? Dad's letting me take it. They're worried about you too. After hanging up, I listened for movement in the house. Nothing. Either Derek and Mom were hiding in their room, or they'd left, perhaps fleeing before police arrived, or intercepting them outside to spin some story about a misunderstanding. Moving as quietly as possible, I gathered essential documents, birth certificate, social security card, ID, and stuffed them into my purse. With excruciating pain, I managed to pull on jeans and a sweatshirt over my pajamas, every movement sending shards of agony through my shoulder. The house remained silent as I crept downstairs, finding my laptop on the kitchen counter where I'd left it earlier. No sign of Derek or Mom. Outside, no police cars. Had they come and gone? Had Derek somehow convinced them everything was fine? I unlocked the front door and stepped into the cool night air, my dislocated shoulder sending waves of nausea through me with each step. At the end of the driveway, I sank down on the curb, keeping to the shadows, and waited for Kayla. Her parents' sedan appeared exactly 20 minutes later, headlights off as it coasted to a stop beside me. Kayla gasped when she saw my face in the dim street light. "Hospital," she said, helping me into the passenger seat. "Right now?" "No," I protested weakly. "He might look there. We need to get away first." "Ashley, your shoulder is completely wrong, and your face." She trailed off, looking horrified. "Please," I begged. "Just drive. Anywhere but here." She reluctantly agreed, and we drove in silence to her apartment. Her roommates gasped when they saw me, immediately pulling out their first aid kit and offering ice packs. "We should call the police again," Kayla insisted. "They didn't help last time," I reminded her, the ice pack dulling the throbbing in my jaw slightly. "And we don't know what Derek told them tonight." After some debate, we compromised. We'd drive to the hospital in the neighboring town, 30 miles away, where Derek had fewer connections. I'd use my own insurance but give Kayla's address for paperwork. Then we'd head straight for Seattle, not stopping at the house again. At Lakeside Memorial Hospital, the emergency room doctor took one look at my injuries and called in a social worker. My dislocated shoulder required sedation to reset, and I had severe bruising on my face, throat, and arms. X-rays confirmed no broken bones, but the doctor documented everything as consistent with assault. The social worker, a kind-eyed woman named Tanya, sat with me while Kayla went to fill my pain medication prescription. "We filed a mandatory report with police," she explained. "But what happens next is your choice. Do you want to press charges?" I thought about the previous police report, how quickly Derek had undermined it, how thoroughly the system had failed me. "Not right now," I said finally. "I just need to get somewhere safe." She nodded, not pushing. "Where will you go?" "Seattle. I have a job starting in 2 weeks." Tanya provided information about domestic violence resources in Seattle, adding, "The documentation from tonight will remain in your medical record. If you decide to pursue legal action later, it will be there." By dawn, my shoulder was stabilized in a sling, my face was partially hidden behind bruises, and Kayla had loaded her car with what few belongings we'd managed to salvage. The tiny U-Haul truck I'd reserved for later that day had been cancelled, my carefully planned departure replaced with this desperate flight. As we pulled onto the interstate heading west, the rising sun at our backs, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: fear of the unknown ahead, grief for the mother I was leaving behind, physical pain from my injuries. But beneath it all was something unexpected: relief. Despite the violence, despite losing most of my possessions, despite the trauma of the night, I was finally free. "You okay?" Kayla asked, glancing over as she merged into traffic. I wasn't, not by any standard definition. But I would be. "I'm getting there," I answered, watching the highway signs for Seattle flash by. "I'm getting there." The drive to Seattle should have taken 3 hours. With frequent stops for me to take pain medication and adjust my position to ease my shoulder pain, it took nearly 6. Kayla drove the entire way, checking on me constantly, her worry evident in the tight set of her jaw. We arrived at my new apartment building, a modest complex in a working-class neighborhood, just after noon. The property manager took one look at my bruised face and sling and didn't ask questions about my lack of furniture or rental history. She simply handed over the keys with a gentle smile and said, "Welcome home, honey." Those two words, "welcome home," brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Home. A concept that had become foreign during the years with Derek. The apartment was small, just a studio with a kitchenette and bathroom, but it was mine. No one could enter without my permission. No one would monitor my movements or question my choices. The freedom was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. Kayla stayed for 3 days, sleeping on an air mattress she'd brought, helping me navigate one-handed daily tasks, and accompanying me to follow-up medical appointments. When she finally had to return for her own graduation, our goodbye in the apartment doorway was tearful. "I don't know how to thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Just build a good life," she replied, hugging me carefully to avoid my injured shoulder. "That's all the thanks I need." After she left, the reality of my situation settled in. I was alone in a new city, physically injured, traumatized, with minimal possessions and limited funds. The marketing job wouldn't start for another 10 days. The quiet of the apartment, once welcome, now felt oppressive. That night, I experienced my first major panic attack. A car backfired outside, and suddenly I was back in my bedroom with Derek breaking down the door. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, convinced he had found me. When the episode passed, I sat on my air mattress until dawn, back against the wall, jumping at every sound. The next morning, I found the card Tanya had given me and called the Seattle Domestic Violence Outreach Center. They connected me with an advocate named Jessie who arranged for me to join a support group that met twice weekly. She also helped me apply for temporary financial assistance and referred me to a therapist who specialized in trauma, Dr. Marcus Hayes. Those first weeks were a blur of pain medication, physical therapy appointments for my shoulder, and basic survival. I purchased essential items from thrift stores: a second-hand futon, mismatched dishes, a wobbly table and chair. Each night, I reinforced my apartment door with a security bar Jessie had provided. Physical recovery progressed faster than emotional healing. 6 weeks of physical therapy restored most function to my shoulder, though certain movements would always cause discomfort. The visible bruises faded, but the invisible ones remained raw. Nightmares plagued me: Derek breaking in, Mom standing by watching, me trying to scream but no sound emerging. I'd wake gasping, drenched in sweat, then check and recheck the locks before huddling on the futon until morning. The marketing job provided structure and purpose. My colleagues were friendly but not intrusive, accepting my vague explanations about relocating for a fresh start. My boss, Diane, seemed to sense there was more to my story but respected my privacy, offering flexibility for my therapy appointments without requiring detailed explanations. In therapy with Dr. Hayes, I began the slow work of processing what had happened. He diagnosed me with PTSD and introduced techniques for managing flashbacks and panic attacks, grounding exercises, breathing patterns, thought reframing. We worked through my complicated feelings about Mom. The anger at her betrayal, the guilt about leaving her, the grief for the mother-daughter relationship we'd lost. "Your mother made her choices," Dr. Hayes reminded me. "Just as you made yours. Her decisions are not your responsibility." 3 months after my escape, I received the first contact from Mom: an email to my old account that I checked occasionally through a secure browser. "Ashley, please let us know you're okay. We've been worried sick. The police have been asking questions." Derek explained it was just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. He's been seeing a counselor for his temper. "Please come home. Things will be different now." The email contained no acknowledgement of what had really happened, no apology for her role, no recognition of the severity of Derek's violence. It was as if she was describing a minor disagreement rather than an assault that had sent me to the hospital. I showed the email to Dr. Hayes in our next session. "What do you want to do?" he asked after I'd read it aloud. I considered the question carefully. Part of me wants to tell her everything: how he dislocated my shoulder, how I had nightmares for months, how I still flinch when someone raises their voice. But another part knows she won't really hear it. She's still in his reality. And what does the part of you that's focused on your own healing want? Boundaries, I said finally. Clear, firm boundaries. My reply to Mom was brief and direct. I am safe and building a new life. I will not be returning home. Derek physically assaulted me, and you chose not to help. I need space and time to heal. Please respect that by not contacting me for now. I signed up for a self-defense class at a local community center, building both physical skills and confidence. Each successful block or strike helped reclaim some power that Derek had stolen. The instructor, a survivor herself, understood the difference between technical training and emotional recovery. The goal isn't just to know how to fight back, she explained during one session. It's to know in your bones that you're worth fighting for. Through the support group, I connected with other survivors, women and men of various ages and backgrounds who understood without explanation the hypervigilance, the trust issues, the journey of reclaiming yourself after abuse. Sharing my story in that safe space was cathartic. Hearing others' journeys gave me hope. 6 months after leaving, I received another email from Mom. This one was different. Ashley, Derek hit me last night. I don't know what to do. He says it was my fault for questioning him about money. Maybe he's right. I shouldn't have pushed him. But I'm scared. Please help. My hand shook as I read it. The moment I'd both feared and predicted had arrived. With me safely away, Derek had turned his violence toward Mom. Part of me felt vindicated finally, proof I hadn't imagined or exaggerated the danger. But mostly, I felt sick with worry and conflict. I brought the email to my next therapy session, my emotions a tangled mess of concern, anger, and guilt. She's asking for help, I said, pacing Dr. Hayes' office. But I can't go back there. I can't put myself in his path again. What are your options that don't involve returning? Together, we brainstormed ways I could offer support without compromising my safety. I could connect Mom with domestic violence resources in her area. I could help her develop an exit strategy, just as others had helped me. I could provide emotional support from a distance. That evening, I called Mom for the first time since leaving. Her voice when she answered was small, timid, so unlike the strong mother who had raised me. Ashley? Is that really you? It's me, Mom. I got your email. Are you somewhere safe right now? Is Derek there? He's at a business dinner. Won't be home until late. She paused. I shouldn't have bothered you. It wasn't that bad, really. Just a slap. I provoked him. The familiar pattern of minimizing, justifying, accepting blame, I recognized it all too well. Mom, listen to me. It's not your fault. Nothing you do justifies him hitting you. Nothing. Silence on the line, then a muffled sob. I miss you, she whispered. I miss you too, I admitted, surprised by the truth of it. But I can't come back. You know that, right? I know. Another pause. I'm sorry, Ashley. For that night. For not stopping him. For not believing you before. It was the first acknowledgement, however slight, of her role in what had happened. A tiny crack in the wall of denial she'd built. There are people who can help, I said. The same way they helped me. But you have to be ready to leave. Really leave. I don't know if I can, she confessed. This house, our friends, my job, it's my whole life. Your life or your safety, Mom. That might be the choice. We talked for an hour. I gave her the number for the domestic violence hotline and names of local resources. I explained how I'd planned my escape, how I'd rebuilt in Seattle. I offered to help her financially if she decided to leave. When we hung up, I had no idea if she would act on any of it. But for the first time, a door had opened between us, a possibility of honest communication, however fragile. That night, lying in my bed in my small but safe apartment, I realized how far I'd come. 6 months earlier, I'd arrived broken, terrified, with nothing but a few documents and the clothes on my back. Now I had a job, an apartment filled with second-hand treasures, new friends, and developing confidence. The nightmares hadn't stopped completely, the PTSD still flared in unexpected moments, but I was healing. I was building a life that was truly mine. And perhaps most importantly, I was breaking the cycle of abuse that had nearly destroyed me. Whatever Mom decided, whatever happened next, I had found my strength and my voice. I just didn't realize yet how soon I would need both for what was coming. 1 year after my midnight escape, I hardly recognized my life. I'd been promoted at work, moved to a slightly larger apartment with actual bedroom walls, and developed a small but solid circle of friends. My shoulder still ached during rainstorms, a permanent reminder of that night, but physical therapy had restored most functionality. My therapist Dr. Hayes had suggested a project to mark the anniversary, something symbolic to acknowledge how far I'd come. I decided to start a blog anonymously sharing my experience and recovery journey. I didn't expect many readers, but writing helped process lingering emotions. To my surprise, the blog gained traction. Comments appeared from other survivors sharing their stories. Private messages arrived asking for advice on safety planning. What began as personal therapy evolved into an informal support network. 3 months after launching the blog, I received a message that changed everything. I think my husband might be your stepfather. The details in your story match. He has a temper that's getting worse. I found your blog while researching domestic violence resources. If it's the same man, I need to know what I'm dealing with. The message was signed Andrea with a phone number. Derek's ex-wife before Mom, the one he'd claimed was unstable and vindictive during their divorce. With Dr. Hayes' guidance, I called Andrea from a blocked number, cautious about potential traps. Within minutes of conversation, it became clear this was indeed Derek's ex-wife, and her experiences mirrored mine and Mom's with eerie similarity. He never hit me until after the wedding, Andrea explained. Then it was always my fault. I provoked him, I was too emotional, I didn't understand the pressure he was under. Andrea had managed to escape the marriage after 2 years, but Derek had systematically destroyed her credibility among friends and family, painting her as mentally unstable after she filed for divorce. She'd rebuilt her life in another state, just as I had. I always wondered if he would do it again, she said. If I should have tried harder to warn the next woman. It wasn't your responsibility, I assured her. You had to save yourself first. Our conversation lasted hours, filling in gaps in each other's understanding of Derek's pattern of abuse. Andrea mentioned something that caught my attention. Derek had once been arrested in their town for assault after a bar fight, but charges were dropped when the other man suddenly refused to testify. He bragged about paying the guy off, Andrea recalled. Said everyone has a price. This nugget of information sparked an idea. If Derek had a criminal record, however minor, in another jurisdiction, it might help establish a pattern if Mom ever decided to press charges. The next day, I called lawyer Jennifer from the domestic violence legal clinic where I'd been volunteering. She listened to my idea with growing interest. It's worth looking into, she agreed. If there's documentation in another county, it could strengthen a case here. Jennifer's paralegal began researching Derek's history, digging beyond the county where we'd lived. 2 weeks later, she called with startling news. Your stepfather has an outstanding warrant in Pinewood County, 3 hours north of your hometown. Assault charges from 8 years ago. He never appeared for his court date, and since it's a different jurisdiction, it never showed up in local checks. The revelation was stunning. Derek, so careful about maintaining his respectable image, was technically a fugitive. The assault had occurred during a business trip, the victim a hotel employee who'd allegedly provided inadequate service. Meanwhile, Mom had been calling me weekly since her first disclosure about Derek hitting her. The abuse had continued, though she still minimized it. She wasn't ready to leave, but a seed had been planted. I maintained contact without pressure, offering support while respecting her timeline. During one call, Mom mentioned that Derek had been increasingly paranoid, installing additional security cameras around the house and checking her phone regularly. "He thinks someone's watching him," she said. "He keeps saying we need to be careful about who we trust." The comment struck me as odd until Jennifer called the next day with another discovery. A detective named Ryan from Pinewood County had been trying to locate Derek regarding the outstanding warrant. He'd recently contacted Derek's workplace. "This explains his paranoia," Jennifer said. "He knows they're closing in." Detective Ryan agreed to speak with me after Jennifer explained my situation. He was a domestic violence specialist who'd seen too many cases like mine. "That warrant gives us leverage," he explained. "But what would really build a case is multiple victims coming forward." A plan began forming. I contacted Andrea, who agreed to provide a sworn statement about her experiences with Derek. I compiled my medical records, photos of injuries, and therapy notes documenting PTSD symptoms. Jennifer prepared affidavits from my support group facilitator and Kayla, who had witnessed the aftermath of abuse. The most challenging part was approaching Mom. I called her from Jennifer's office, with the lawyer and Detective Ryan present. "Mom, there's a way out," I said after explaining what we'd discovered. "Derek has an outstanding warrant. Other women are speaking up about his abuse. This is a chance for accountability." Her response was unexpected. "He knows something's happening. He's been talking about selling the house, moving us out of state. He says it's for a job opportunity, but he's rushing everything." Detective Ryan leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, if you're willing to file a report about the violence you've experienced, we can act immediately. Combined with the warrant and other testimonies, we have grounds for arrest." A long pause followed. I held my breath, knowing this was Mom's decision alone. "What do I need to do?" she finally asked. The next 48 hours moved with breathtaking speed. Mom filed a police report detailing recent incidents. Detective Ryan coordinated with local authorities to execute the outstanding warrant. Andrea provided her statement remotely. Jennifer ensured all documentation was properly filed. I remained in Seattle, anxiously awaiting updates, torn between hope for justice and fear of what Derek might do if cornered. The call came from Detective Ryan on a Wednesday afternoon. "We have him in custody. Your mother is safe." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by concern. "How is she?" "Shaken but resolute. She's with a victim advocate now." He paused. "There's something else you should know. When officers arrived, your mother was injured. Apparently, Derek discovered her packing a bag." My heart sank. "How bad?" "Bruised ribs, facial contusions. She's received medical attention." Another pause. "She wants to see you." 2 days later, I sat in a conference room at the district attorney's office, waiting. When the door opened, I barely recognized the woman who entered. Mom looked smaller somehow, her confident teacher's posture replaced with a protective hunch. A fading bruise colored her cheekbone. "Ashley," she whispered, and then we were embracing, both crying. "I'm so sorry," she repeated against my hair. "I should have protected you. I should have believed you." "I'm sorry too," I said. "For leaving you behind." "No," she said firmly, pulling back to look at me. "You did exactly what you needed to do. You showed me it was possible to escape. You saved yourself, and then you helped save me." The district attorney joined us, explaining that Derek faced multiple charges. The original assault from the outstanding warrant, domestic violence charges from Mom's report, and additional charges related to financial exploitation they discovered while executing the search warrant. "We'd like both of you to testify," she explained. "Along with Andrea and any other victims willing to come forward." The weeks that followed were among the most challenging I'd ever experienced. Through my blog, 2 more women contacted me with stories about Derek, one a former colleague, another a neighbor. Each account reinforced the pattern of manipulation and escalating violence. Derek's response was predictable. He hired an expensive attorney who attempted to paint all of us as emotionally unstable women conspiring against an innocent man. He claimed Mom's injuries were from falling, that I had fabricated abuse allegations out of resentment over normal parental discipline, that Andrea was bitter over their divorce. The familiar tactics might have worked in isolation, but against our collective testimony, supported by medical records, police reports, and the outstanding warrant, they crumbled. The turning point came during a preliminary hearing when Mom was called to testify. I sat in the courtroom, watching her approach the witness stand. Derek's attorney had been aggressive with previous witnesses, attempting to undermine credibility through intimidation. As questioning began, I saw Mom glance at Derek, who sat beside his attorney with the confident expression of a man who expected loyalty and silence. Their eyes met, and something shifted in Mom's posture. She straightened her shoulders and turned away from him, facing the prosecutor directly. "Mrs. Carter, please describe your relationship with the defendant," the prosecutor began. Mom took a deep breath. "For 8 years, I lived in fear of the man I married. I watched him abuse my daughter while I did nothing. I allowed him to isolate me from friends and family. I believed his lies about my worth, my sanity, my options. I bear responsibility for my inaction, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I am here today to speak the truth, finally, about what happened in our home." For the next hour, Mom detailed incidents of physical, emotional, and financial abuse with a clarity and precision that left no room for doubt. Derek's attorney attempted to rattle her with accusations and leading questions, but Mom remained steady, refusing to be diverted or intimidated. When asked why she hadn't reported the abuse sooner, she looked directly at Derek and said, "Because he convinced me that no one would believe me. Today, I'm proving him wrong." Derek's facade cracked visibly during Mom's testimony. The charming, controlled mask slipped, revealing flashes of the rage I knew too well. The jury saw it too, the tightening of his jaw, the white-knuckled fists, the contemptuous glare. 3 weeks later, Derek was convicted on multiple counts of domestic assault, battery, violation of a restraining order, and fraud related to financial exploitation. The judge, citing the pattern of escalating violence and lack of remorse, sentenced him to 7 years in prison. In my victim impact statement at sentencing, I spoke not only about the physical injuries and PTSD, but about the deeper damage, the trust destroyed, the safety shattered, the relationship with my mother fractured. I concluded by looking directly at Derek. "You taught me that love can be weaponized, that family can be manipulated, that homes can become prisons. But you also taught me something you never intended, that I am stronger than your violence, more resilient than your control, and more powerful than your fear. My freedom is my victory." 1 year after the trial, I stood before a group of 20 women and men at the Domestic Violence Support Center where I now worked part-time alongside my marketing career. Mom sat in the back row, now a regular attendee and occasional speaker. "Recovery isn't linear," I told the group. "Some days still bring flashbacks. Some nights still bring nightmares. But healing happens in the spaces between those moments, in the ordinary Tuesday afternoons when you realize you've gone hours without looking over your shoulder, in the quiet evenings when you sleep with your door unlocked because you finally feel safe." Mom and I had rebuilt our relationship gradually, attending joint therapy sessions and learning to communicate honestly about the past. She had returned to teaching, moved to an apartment near mine, and recently started dating a kind mathematics professor who showed none of Derek's controlling tendencies. Andrea had become an unexpected friend, our shared experience creating a unique bond. The blog had evolved into a non-profit organization providing resources for domestic violence survivors, with Andrea serving on the board of directors. After the support group, Mom and I walked to a nearby cafe for our weekly coffee date. "I saw this yesterday," she said, sliding a newspaper clipping across the table. It was a small article about Derek being denied early parole. "How do you feel about it?" I asked carefully. She considered the question. "Relieved. But also, free. His power over my thoughts diminishes every day." I nodded, understanding completely. "That's the real victory." "You know what today is?" Mom asked, stirring her coffee. I smiled. 2 years since I left. 2 years since you showed me what courage looks like. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You didn't just save yourself, Ashley. You broke a cycle that could have continued for generations. As we walked back to our apartments in the soft Seattle rain, I reflected on the journey from that midnight terror to this peaceful afternoon. The physical scars had faded, though my shoulder still reminded me of that night during cold weather. The emotional wounds were healing, though certain triggers could still catapult me back momentarily. But the woman walking beside me was no longer the terrified girl who fled with nothing but the clothes on her back. I had reclaimed my safety, my voice, and most importantly, my future. In helping others find their path to freedom, I had discovered my purpose. The cycle of abuse that had nearly destroyed us was broken. And in its place, we were building something new, a legacy of courage, truth, and healing that would extend far beyond our own stories. What about you? Have you ever had to completely rebuild your life after a traumatic experience? What gave you the strength to keep going when everything seemed impossible? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found my story helpful or inspiring, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that escape and healing are possible. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you are stronger than you know and deserving of a life free from fear.